All right, I think somebody took a wheel off my chair up here. Who was that, Yoho?
You need training.
This hearing of the Subcommittee on Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research entitled The Next Farm Bill, Agricultural Research will come to order. Good morning and welcome to today's Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research Subcommittee hearing. I'd like to welcome our three witnesses and all the guests today. This hearing continues our series where each of the 6 subcommittees is looking at all aspects of the current and the next Farm Bill. The focus of today's hearing is on agricultural research. As we kick off the discussion, try to imagine where the United States as a whole, and American agriculture in particular, would be without the massive productivity gains that have resulted from more than a century of investment in ag research. We enjoy the safest, most affordable, and most abundant food supply in the world, in large part due to sustained public investment in agriculture research. In fact, the USDA describes the rise in agricultural productivity as the single most important source of economic growth in the entire U.S. farm sector. USDA's research, education, and economics mission area includes 4 agencies that serve as the federal lead for our research, education, and extension activities. USDA's Agricultural Research Service conducts research and develops solutions for ag problems of high national priority. The Economic Research Service, through science-based economic research and analysis, informs public policy and other decisions about agriculture, food, rural development, and environmental challenges. The National Ag Statistics Service, Agricultural Statistics Service, conducts hundreds of surveys every year and prepares reports covering virtually every aspect of U.S. agriculture. And the National Institute of Food and Agriculture supports research, education, and extension programs in the land-grant university system and other partner organizations. Together with state-level and private sector funding, the U.S. ag research system is the envy of the world. And while private sector research investment is substantial and growing, public funding for ag research in the United States has been on the decline for the past decade. Agricultural research increasingly occupies a smaller share of the United States public research portfolio. And at the same time, other countries like China are rapidly outpacing U.S. public investment. Given that public research is often the foundation upon which private research is built, public investment is essential to maintaining our competitiveness in our U.S. ag economy. We have a tremendous legacy of supporting public agricultural research in this country. While we have a lot of difficult decisions to make, ag research will be a vital part of ensuring the success of America's agricultural sector over the next century. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses today in exploring the importance of ag research, in addressing ag research priorities, and in examining the effectiveness of public-private research partnerships. To that end, I will welcome their thoughts on the next Farm Bill as well. With that, I turn to my friend and my colleague, the ranking member, Ms. Lujan Grisham, for any opening statements she'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everybody in the hearing. And thank you very much again to the panel and our witnesses this morning. There's no question, and I thought that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, made an incredible, valid point, which is the public money that we're investing in research. This gives us the best public-private partnering, so that we're getting resources into private research firms, we're getting those resources into universities, and we're creating an environment where we have a huge return into the ag industry, and then, of course, into the U.S. economy as a whole. It is imperative that we continue to talk about ways to enhance those efforts because, as the chairman mentioned, and I agree, we've seen a decline in that, and I'm hoping that we're going to talk about strategies to increase that as a priority and to really dedicate ourselves to identifying the places where we could do additional research. I'm going to give you an example. Dr. Ian Ray, who is a plant breeder at New Mexico State University, which is not in my district, but a great university nonetheless. It's a land-grant institution in the southern part of the state. Now, he's developed a drought-resistant, or frankly, I would really call it an arid variety of alfalfa. And it's named the Billy Melton alfalfa, and it's commercially available for the first time this season. Now, to put that in the right perspective, Mr. Chairman, New Mexico has one of the worst water shortage issues. We're in the middle of a 100-year drought, and we need every kind of low-water crop that we can, and alfalfa is one of our mainstay crops, not just for our ag community, but for the ag economy in New Mexico. Economists say that if we were to be able to get that done immediately, we could save $2 million in just core water costs in the state. We are being outspent by China, who is continuing to increase and bolster its research investments. And we've also now seen Brazil and India catch up in their research investments. That means that the demand for agricultural scientists is increasing, and many of America's best and brightest are being, if you will, poached by foreign research firms and universities. After reading your testimony, it's certainly clear to me that we have to do more. However, after getting a glimpse of the president's current budget, it looks to me like there's a cut to the agricultural discretionary spending by about $4.7 billion, and that absolutely can impact where our research priorities are. And so I'm concerned about that and would love the committee to try to address that in today's hearing. Furthermore, it impacts our ability, right, to recruit and train our own ag scientists and to get young people into the ag industry. And while we're doing better at promoting women and minorities into ag research and ag work, this would further diminish our efforts, I worry. So, Mr. Chairman, it's critical that we continue to discuss these areas. Thank you very much for your support for research. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Lujan Grisham. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure that there is ample time for questions. I'm going to go ahead and introduce all three of our witnesses and then allow each of you to make opening statements. I'd first like to welcome Dr. Jay Akridge, the Glenn W. Sample Dean of Agriculture at Purdue University, one of the secondary land-grant universities to the University of Illinois, of course. And Purdue, as you know, is in West Lafayette, Indiana. Good luck in the NCAA tournament. We are playing in the NIT, so I know you'll wish us luck there. I know Dr. Akridge is here on behalf of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. Thank you for being here. Mr. Richard Wilkins, the chairman of the American Soybean Association, from Greenwood, Delaware, on behalf of the National Coalition for Food and Ag Research, and my friend, Dr. James Carrington, the president of the Danforth Research Center in St. Louis, Missouri, that I and our colleague on this committee, Congressman Mike Boss, had the chance to tour together just a few short months ago. So welcome to all three of you. I would remind the witnesses that there will be a clock in front of you of 5 minutes. We would appreciate if you would keep it to 5 minutes. We will try to do the same up here. And if you hear a little tap, that means that you haven't looked at the clock and sped up a little bit. We'll make sure you do. So with that, Dr. Akridge, please begin when you're ready.
Oh, thanks, Chairman Davis. University of Illinois is a great competitor, but also a great collaborator in our academic enterprise. So,
and we have better, cooler colors of ties, right?
But Chairman Davis, Ranking Member Lujan Grisham, and members of the subcommittee, again, my name is Jay Akridge. I'm Dean of the College of Agriculture at Purdue, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I'm here representing the Board on Ag Assembly of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. The BAA represents a national system that knits together more than 107 land grants and 60 non-land grant universities. While public support for agricultural research and education comes from a variety of sources, my comments today will focus on the extramural funds, capacity and competitive funds provided by USDA through the National Institute of Food and Agriculture and authorized in the Farm Bill. In my written testimony, I outlined the case for public investments in agricultural research and extension as fundamental for global competitiveness of our U.S. agriculture and provide a brief overview of the key points here. But I'd be pleased to elaborate on these or provide Purdue examples during the discussion. As has been mentioned, the productivity story of U.S. agriculture is extraordinary, and that productivity was fueled by research and education. As just one small example, corn yields in the 1930s were 30 bushels per acre, increasing to about 100 bushels per acre while I was growing up in my family's retail farm supply business in western Kentucky. Last year, U.S. corn average yields was 175 bushels per acre. However, there's no resting on our laurels as the world's population is increasing, forecast to hit 9+ billion in 2050, which requires 25 to 100% more food. The Global Harvest Initiative reports that total factor productivity must grow by 1.75% per year for the world to double agricultural production by 2050. But how to drive that level of productivity has become much more complex as the new century, and this has been alluded to in the opening comments. More variable weather has brought new challenges to the world's farmers. Access to new arable land is limited. Availability and competition for water is increasingly an issue. The environmental implications of farming practices are being questioned globally. Some consumers have demonstrated much deeper interest in how and where food is produced, and societal acceptance of new technology cannot be taken for granted. Given these issues, what set of technologies and investments in human talent will drive the type of agriculture needed, and who will provide them? The science of the 21st century agriculture will be built on data, collected in ways and volumes unprecedented in our history. The word convergence will characterize agricultural technology as biology, data analytics, and automation combined to provide the productivity increases we need. Universities can play a unique role in bringing these disciplines together and realizing this future. At the same time, the next century will not be ours alone, as other nations are investing heavily in public agricultural research, and U.S. agricultural competitiveness will be a key issue. As of 2011, for every dollar the United States invested in public agriculture R&D, China, Brazil, and India combined invested $2.15. In addition, U.S. agricultural competitiveness will require both private and public investment. In 1950, public spending on ag research was about 65% of the total investment. By 2010, that figure had declined to 35%. But public research is needed to address the questions that the private sector will not, and public-private partnerships will be increasingly important. While technology is important, technology in the hands of farmers who know how to use it is even more important. Cooperative extension plays a key role in disseminating research to stakeholders, and as our stakeholders have evolved, so has extension, with the traditional county-based extension educator or agent complemented by direct access to campus-based extension specialists and a wide variety of e-learning tools. Competitiveness is built on human talent, and our colleges of agriculture are focused on providing the talent needed for the next century, with more than 175,000 students enrolled across all degree levels. 4-H, a youth development program of cooperative extension, is a talent pipeline and reaches nearly 6 million youth annually. New STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math programming is taking the proven 4-H volunteer-led model into exciting new areas. What are some of the challenges looking ahead? Federal funding for ag research has been stagnant over the past decade in real terms. From 2005 to 2012, USDA funding for ag research declined by 16%, falling from $2.9 to $2.4 billion. Our system needs investments in capacity and competitive funds. Federal capacity funds provide land-grant universities with the human talent required to address local research and extension needs, provide timely response in emergency situations such as disease or pest outbreaks, and ultimately the capacity to pursue competitively funded research. Another significant challenge is the state of our university infrastructure, and we face a current deficit of about $8.4 billion there. In closing, the most recent QS World University rankings show that 10 of the top 15 ag and forestry universities globally are located within the U.S. With a proven record of impact and with appropriate levels of federal funding, our land-grant agricultural colleges are ready to address the challenge of helping to ensure the agricultural competitiveness of our U.S. agriculture. I want to thank you for this opportunity today and to thank you for your past support of ag research and extension.
Thank you, Mr. Akridge. Mr. Wilkins, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Richard Wilkins, and I'm a farmer from Greenwood, Delaware, the state that continuously ranks first in the nation in gross farm revenue per acre of farmland. I am pleased to testify today in my capacity as Vice President of the National Coalition for Food and Agricultural Research. My written testimony is provided for the record, and I will use my time today to offer a few highlights. NCFAR is a customer-led coalition that advocates sustaining and increasing public investment in food and agricultural science. Our support encompasses the entire USDA research, extension, and education mission area, including extramural and intramural programs. By customer, I mean not only my farm business, but all the other stakeholders who need and benefit from the scientific outcomes that are produced by our nation's publicly funded agricultural research. I would suggest that all of us are customers, including the members of this subcommittee. While I am not a researcher, I do appreciate the vital role that researchers play. Modern agriculture is a science-based business. I know that I can do what I do better because of advancements made possible by federal investments in agricultural research. The research title of the Farm Bill represents the nation's signature federal investment in the future of the food and agricultural sector. The success of every other title in the Farm Bill is connected to scientific outcomes made possible through the research title. I respectfully submit that we as a nation are not investing enough in publicly funded research to regain and then maintain our nation's place as the leader in agricultural research. That is a major reason I invest a significant amount of my time in NCFAR, the American Soybean Association, and other groups to help make the case for public investment in food and agricultural research. Investment in food and agricultural science is not only good business, it's good for business. One recent report estimates a return on investment of ag research dollars of about 67%. Yet federal funding for agricultural research has been essentially flat for over 20 years, despite much greater demonstrated needs, and has reportedly declined by about 25% in real terms since 2003. Our nation's competitiveness in global markets is at risk, as investments in agricultural research by our global competitors have been growing rapidly. NCFAR has several activities underway with the objective of better informing our leadership and others in laying the groundwork for a strong research title and the necessary funding. One new initiative I am pleased to announce is that NCFAR is involved in planning for a summit on integrated research, education, and extension priorities to advance American agriculture. The aim of the summit is to engage stakeholders in developing a vision for what the agricultural research enterprise should look like to best serve the needs of the food and agricultural system in the 21st century. The summit will focus on 4 critical areas: fueling growth in the agricultural economy through rapid adoption of innovations, harnessing the power of big ag data in research and extension, advancing the health of U.S. consumers and environmental quality, and assuring the security of United States agriculture and food systems. Additional information will be made available in the near future. We appreciate the long-standing leadership of this subcommittee in authorizing and overseeing implementation of a strong research title, and we look forward to working with you. I appreciate the opportunity to share our views and would be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Dr. Carrington, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, and good morning, Chairman Davis, Ranking Member Lujan Grisham, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Jim Carrington, and I'm the president of the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis, Missouri. We are a research-intensive organization of about 240 scientists and staff working every day to improve the human condition through plant science. Thank you for the invitation to discuss the vital role of research as you prepare for the next Farm Bill. First, let me state very clearly, providing food security for a growing, changing world, while at the same time preserving our natural resources, like water and soil, and maintaining a healthy environment for this and future generations is among the grandest of grand challenges for the 21st century. My colleagues and I believe we can meet this challenge, but by attracting the best minds to the problem, by continuing to grow and support federal investments in research, and by delivering innovations to the marketplace through the private sector. The role of public investment by the USDA in research to meet this challenge cannot be overstated. Past research in agronomy, genetics, genomics, computer science, data science, and many other fields means that now we have technologies to breed improved crops and livestock much more quickly and effectively, to preserve more soil and water resources, to reduce the costs of production, to maintain quality and affordability for the consumer. These all start with investments in fundamental science. Publicly funded agricultural research, as has been pointed out, has extensive economic payback, and as has been well documented by USDA. And we can see a glimpse of future returns just by looking in the neighborhood around the Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis, where federal research, private capital, entrepreneurs, and community support have attracted and grown nearly 40 high-tech, ag-tech companies just within the past few years. As you consider the next Farm Bill, I strongly encourage recommitting to and strengthening research within USDA, and I'll restrict the remainder of my comments specifically about competitive research funded through and supported by the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, or AFRI program, within NIFA. As the flagship USDA competitive grants program, AFRI should have a budget that reflects the program's broad scope and responsibilities and its mission that affects every U.S. citizen. We stand with many other organizations in supporting continued growth of competitive research funding through mechanisms that Congress determines to be most appropriate and stable. Current funding levels are modest, to put it plainly, and not on par with other agencies like NIH that fund research supporting other national priorities. To illustrate, I'll give you an example from the Danforth Center. Consider that we were awarded over the past 2 calendar years, from January 2015 to present, we've been awarded about $21.7 million in new competitive federal grants from 3 agencies, NSF, Department of Energy, and the USDA through AFRI. Of that $21.7 million, only $1.1 million, or 5%, of those new awards came from the AFRI program. This was not due to the funded topical areas, which align extremely well with our center's mission and capabilities, but rather to the modest size of the AFRI budget. I've got a few comments that we can talk about in more detail later. They have to do with structural and managerial aspects of AFRI. I would refer the subcommittee to a 2015 National Research Council report that I was honored to co-author called Spurring Innovation in Food and Agriculture, a review of the USDA AFRI program. We pointed out many strengths of the program and why it exists and why it should remain. But we also made several recommendations, such as developing a dedicated leadership team with sole responsibility for AFRI, and putting in place stronger mechanisms to align the scientific community with national priorities. We also recommended that AFRI reconsider its indirect cost recovery policies, which are capped at 30% of overall awards. This funds only part of the real costs to support AFRI-funded research. For example, for every dollar that AFRI direct research funding, every dollar that we receive in direct funding, the center needs to contribute 22 cents from other sources to fully fund the project. That's non-sustainable for us and for other AFRI recipient organizations. Finally, I'll make the case that competition for AFRI funds should be on a level playing field, and that provisions in the 2014 Farm Bill which authorizes a dollar-for-dollar matching requirement for non-land grant university institutions like the Danforth Center or Washington University. We recommend that that be reconsidered in future legislation and not be included. So with that, I'll thank you for listening, for inviting me here this morning, and for inviting these remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carrington, and thank you to all the witnesses. The chair would like to remind members that they will be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in order of arrival, and I appreciate the members' understanding. And I am going to forego asking the first round of questions because my colleague to my left, your right, Mr. Gibbs, has another hearing to go to, so I recognize him for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your indulgence. Mr. Wilkins, I love your perspective on the per acre thing. I mean, the glass is half full, right? Dr. Akridge, you really hit it on the nose about the changes when you talk about the yield and that. It just kind of symbolizes or illustrates all the change we've seen in agriculture in our lifetimes. And I've always used that example. I've always said in 1950 the national corn crop average was 50 bushel. When I started farming in 1975, my goal was to have a 100 bushel corn crop, and I've reached 195 in some years. And I don't have that, you know, that Illinois ground. So anyways, I guess a question, I think everybody in this committee is going to do what they can to make sure that R&D research is funded for our agriculture where we think it should be. Of course, as you know, the money's tight, resources are tight, and so we got to do it best we can. And I guess, Dr. Akridge, you know, we've seen the changes in agriculture, and we've seen, you know, farms get bigger. Farms that didn't get bigger, they either found a niche or got out of business, or they supplement their income. I'm curious because you brought up the issue about extension on the bigger operations. Can you kind of explain the interaction of disseminating that material to the larger operations, or are they working closely with the land grants, or are they going more to the private sector, or what's the interaction there?
Be pleased to. So certainly looking back in time, every farmer knew their county extension agent, and they provided advice and insight, you know, as counties were populated primarily by farmers. And certainly, as you described, that's changed dramatically with the size and scale and sophistication of the operations. I think there's 2 or 3 ways that extension is really critical to that group now. One is many of those operations will connect directly with our extension specialist on our campus. So those are people funded by Smith-Lever funds that are available to them, many times doing applied research, and that producer wants to ask a question directly of that extension specialist who actually did the work. So we see that in the agronomic side. We see it on the business management side, where those producers want to engage with economists who, again, are very focused on where's the farm economy going. The other thing that's really important to understand is we also partner with the private sector on extension. So many of the CCAs, the certified agronomists that are in the countryside, are trained ultimately by their land grant university and or use materials that were developed by the land grant. So sometimes we're in train-the-trainer mode as we engage with that producer. And then there's still other questions where they may go, well go to their local person about a soil issue, a conservation issue, a practice. So extension remains relevant, although the way we connect with them. And then the last thing I need to mention, e-delivery has become a very important way of connecting with those larger producers. They may not have time to come to campus, but they'll watch a webinar with their farm team, talk about what that meant for their business, and go back to work. So that's been another way we've reached that kind of producer.
That's a great response. I wanted to get that out so people in the public understand that. On this, you mentioned in your testimony how the federal dollars have decreased, and you know, I expect some of that's been kind of offset because I think there's a better partnership now with the private sector. Our private sector companies and their research departments working with the land grants and leveraging money. Can you maybe expound a little bit on how, in your case, Purdue has maybe leveraged money through the private sector to build that private-public partnership you talked about?
So again, in many cases, our faculty working on agricultural issues are paid for by capacity funds provided by the federal government. They then engage with the private sector partners working on research projects that we jointly identify as important. There's things the private sector is going to do that we shouldn't be involved in because it's unique and proprietary to them, but there's a big space where we can work together on moving things forward. It provides great training opportunities for graduate students to work on those industry partnerships. And we are definitely turning this into a partnership. These are not so much projects anymore as long-term relationships where we have goals and metrics and regular meetings to try to make sure we're advancing their agenda, our agenda, and ultimately the public sees the value of the work. So it's been a very important part of what
And I think another benefit, Mr. Chairman, on that is that relationship, that partnership, then you're really focusing on what really needs are. And sometimes I used to work in that sector in my early days, and on the public side. And sometimes you'd see that somebody, one of the professors, kind of get off on a tangent, and you know it's good to file a report or a study, but maybe we got to prioritize. So we did the dollars with the best part. So I think that partnership's great. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. The chair would like to recognize the ranking member of the entire Ag Committee, Mr. Peterson, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, witnesses. I've had a chance to be at both at Purdue and at your place in St. Louis, right? There we are. And you guys do great work, and as said in your testimony, we've made tremendous progress in production agriculture with all of the research that we've done. To some extent, I think that's driven by the commodity groups and the folks that they have money that they put in with you guys, and, right? So the question I have is, it doesn't seem to me like we've done as much research and tried to use science and productivity to manage the conservation issues. Our friends in the environmental community, they want to regulate us and stop us from doing this and that, but I don't see much of them coming forward and saying, can we use technology in conservation like we've used technology in crop production? And I don't know if I know what I'm talking about or not, but for example, we have people in southern Minnesota that are upset because we're putting too much nitrates into the water. And it seemed to me, that's nitrogen, right? Is there a way to capture that nitrogen and put it back into the system rather than just letting it go down the river? And has anything been done to look at that? By using tiling, we're able to deal with some of the issues with the runoff, but nitrates doesn't really fall into that. But our, up in our part of the world, our friends in the environmental community are against tiling, which is probably the best conservation thing we can do, in terms of cleaning up the water. So it's just like CRP, which has been the most popular conservation program, I say most successful we ever had. There, the push from the environmental community is to go back to native species that were grown 500 years ago, that are damn hard to grow, and I can attest from personal experience. So my question is, are people coming to you at the universities to do research, to use your resources to try to improve conservation and use technology in that area?
The answer is absolutely yes. So, and pick your area, but use of cover crops as a conservation tool and using those in a sophisticated way, breeding crops that are more, again, efficient with nutrient utilization.
Well, I understand that, but that doesn't get us any place, because they don't. That actually, with a lot of these folks, they're against that.
Right.
So,
well, and
so
including
the stuff that they seem to come and
Yep.
like what I'm trying to get at is they come and push these things in Congress.
right.
And it doesn't seem like they ever work on trying to solve it.
Right.
other than to regulate us.
Well, and in my mind, there's opportunity for much more work, but there's at least some foundation there to build on. Trying to model, a watershed to figure out which practices are going to help us deal with this issue. So there's some work going on. There's a need for much more, but we are definitely engaged in that issue, and it's definitely front and center for Indiana farmers right now, and they want more answers.
Karen?
Yeah, let me say a few words about this. I'm going to give a shout out to at least one environmental organization, the Nature Conservancy, because they are actually attacking this problem with research and with science. I don't know how much interaction you've had with the Nature Conservancy. In Minnesota, I believe they're quite active as a state chapter. They certainly are in Missouri. But as the largest environmental organization, I would encourage you to interact with them because they have shifted their focus from conservation for conservation's sake, land preservation, for example, wild land preservation, and shifted their focus, their entire organization, to be nature to serve human needs and to accommodate human needs.
Well, before my time runs out, I'm familiar with them, and largely what they've done in my area is buy land. And when
That's
the state,
the old Nature Conservancy.
yeah, but I mean, when the state
Yeah.
put rules against the DNR and other people buying land, what ended up happening is the Nature Conservancy bought it, and then they turned around and sold it to the DNR. And they went in and pushed all of this CRP land into what's called the Beach Ridge in my area. And so we lost all of the CRP in all of the rest of the area, which I would say undermine what we're trying to do. So I don't know, maybe I haven't seen the change. So maybe I'm behind the times, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I don't want to defend Nature Conservancy too much here, but the other thing I do want to say is that there are huge opportunities for research from universities, research institutions, and the private sector to improve the use of things like nitrogen and phosphorus, to be more precise. This whole field of precision agriculture, which you're very familiar with, is geared exactly at addressing the types of problems. Can we use levels of fertilizer and water that are most appropriate, as opposed to putting enough on a field to ensure, let's put enough of what you need, but in a way that assures the farmer they're going to get the most yield that they can. This is an area we're very active in, looking at it from the genetic side, but huge investments in the private sector in technologies to do this with equipment, instrumentation, sensors, and so forth.
Gentlemen's time has expired. The chair would like to recognize Mr. Dunn from Florida, who has another hearing to get to also for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and also, gentlemen, for sharing your time with us today in this briefing. Dr. Carrington, can you discuss some areas of research where federal funding has the potential for the greatest near-term return for the challenges that our farmers face today? Greatest area.
There are a lot of things, and I would very much look forward to hear Mr. Wilkins talk about this as a producer. But the farmer today, very broadly speaking, is in a challenging business. Margins are slim, production costs are not going down, commodity prices are challenging in many cases. The intersection with natural resources is more challenging, and by every measure and every indicator, it's going to get more challenging. Regulation.
I guess I was thinking more of bench-type science rather than research into the economics.
Yeah. So we're very interested in research that will lead in the relative short term to more efficient use of resources and lowered input costs.
Excellent.
This is to benefit the farmer. Precision agriculture is one area. If we can lower the cost of fertilizer, one of the major inputs for many crops, or lower the use of water, not only a costly but a restrictive resource, that will have immediate benefits for the farmer. We can do this because we have done it in the past. Water use efficiency on the farm broadly across agriculture in the U.S. is twice as good as what it was the year I was born, 1960.
That's good. So let me, because the time is pressing, let me turn a question to Mr. Wilkins. When the USDA conducts its research, the research becomes part of the public domain. Is that the situation around the world? Other governments, when they fund research, do we get the benefit of that?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure how other countries handle their public research dollars. I would imagine that that differs between how free a market a particular country is. I can say that I have visited China on a few occasions and have actually visited one of their biotechnology research institutes. I think certainly in that nation, anything that's derived from public research is public property, but then everything within their system is public property.
Do the other members of the panel also have the sense that there's a free flow of information about the research around the world?
I think it does vary country to country, but in general, it finds its way into the public literature, with some exceptions when there's really tight relationships with industry through like contract research organizations where they're really doing private work. And in those cases, it would be held close.
All right. Dr. Carrington, I'm a science junkie. Can you give us an example of some real cutting-edge research or discoveries made at your center that would surprise me, my constituents, and how that was relevant to them, to us as consumers?
Sure. We focus more on the fundamental end of science, and so we're looking for ways to rapidly translate that fundamental knowledge into stuff that's useful for all of us. Give you a few examples. We have a significant effort at the center looking to figure out a mechanism called gene silencing. That might be something, as a science junkie, you might have heard about this, RNA interference. Fascinating mechanism. Nobel Prizes were awarded about 10 years ago. It's an area I've been very active in. Why do we care? We care because it's the main antiviral defense mechanisms of plants. It's the plant immune system when they're infected by viruses. Turns out this has been used to save the papaya industry in Hawaii. We wouldn't have papayas grown domestically in Hawaii if it weren't for technology that was based directly on gene silencing. We would not have...
My time is about to expire, but I want to say that you have satisfied my science junkie in me. So thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair would like to recognize our colleague from Florida, Mr. Lawson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to congratulate Purdue for making the big dance. Be sure to watch Florida State tonight, too. I would like to say my colleague, Congressman Dunn, and I know Congressman Yoho, he and I both share land grant institutions in Florida. Congressman Dunn is about a block away from the land institution here, land grant institution in Tallahassee. So we both represent them, even though they say it's in my district. But what I would like to, my question is similar around is one, and anybody can respond, in the President's request today, there's about a 21% reduction in the budget for agriculture. How does that really affect research at the institutional level? I know you all have a lot of experience in that, but that's quite a bit of reduction going to land grant universities. So any of you can start with you, Dr. Akridge.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, a reduction of that magnitude hits us really in two ways. On capacity funds are those funds that come to our campus via formula, and we pay salaries. So those are salaries of our researchers, their staffs, et cetera. And ultimately, that's the capacity we have to respond to local needs, to respond to emergencies that hit our farmers with weather or crops or pests, or to compete for federal monies. So that kind of a hit means headcount ultimately and reduced capacity. The other place, obviously, it would hit us is in the competitive funding and, a reduction of something like that. And we already know that we've already talked about the AFRI, our competitive program funding. There's tremendous competition for those dollars currently. Roughly 2,700 proposals last year, about 600 funded, and about 800 were deemed worthy of funding, and we weren't able to fund them at the current levels. So we already have intense competition for the available monies, and further cuts just simply put us in a place where we have less ability to fund worthy research.
Dr. Wilkins? Dr. Wilkins, you care to respond to that?
I'll give you a very quick financial overview of the Danforth Center. 50% of our overall budget, which is about $28 million per year, comes from competitive grants. Top three funding agencies or foundations: Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. If there is a decrease in funding available or that we can compete for, that affects that 50% of our budget every year. The other half of our budget, by the way, comes directly or indirectly through philanthropy, annual gifts or gifts that have gone into our endowment that help us support us being an institution. Projects funded by competitive research funding, institutions supported by the endowment and philanthropy. Every cut affects our ability to deliver on our mission.
Okay, and I still have a little time. Since I represent Florida A&M University, I have firsthand have the importance of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Can you discuss the importance of a strong capacity building grant program?
So those capacity funds, again, ultimately help us fund salaries of our faculty and staff that again, provide the capacity to do the work we do. So whether that's answering farmer problems in the field, conducting applied research, working with the 4-H through the youth development organizations, those salaries provide that kind of capacity. And then they also provide the capacity for us to compete for competitive dollars. So without that capacity that establishes this baseline of again, people who do the work, we can't go after competitive funds. So they're incredibly important to us to serve our farmers, the people of our state.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, because of the time restraint here, I yield back, but if you get a chance, I had one other question that I'm not get to about, I think it dealt with lunch in and lunch out, something of that nature, and maybe somebody else can discuss it, but I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida yields back, and a neighbor of mine, phone, right? Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Ted Yoho. I represent Florida's 3rd Congressional District. No offense, but I feel it's the best part of Florida. We have the University of Florida there and IFAS, which is world renowned. And, the work that the land grants do are phenomenal. And if you look at, the ag population is less than 1% of the population of our country, but yet they feed so many, they are so productive that we have to be a strong voice to protect, not just the family farms, but all of agriculture in the United States. And ag has focused so hard on BMPs. The days of indiscriminate use of fertilizers, water, insecticides, herbicides is gone because, number one, the cost, and it just makes better sense to use less. And if you look at what we're producing as far as beef, we're producing the same amount of beef with a third amount of head and a third amount of land being used. And this comes from best managed practices, genetics, things like that. One of the big things in our state is citrus screening. As you know, Florida was a leader in citrus, still is, in citrus and grapefruit, or oranges and grapefruit. And 100% of our crop has been affected. And it's going to happen throughout the country, any place that has citrus. And I know there's a lot of research being done on that. With the research you're doing at the universities, I know there's transgenic work being done on the psyllid, there's work being done on the trees, there's antibacterials being used for the trees and different methods. We've got to continue that. And one of the big things that has come up is the pollinators. You know, one of the effects of pollinators, there's a lot of controversies. Are insecticides bad? Yes, they can be. We met with one of the top researchers from the University of Florida, Dr. Jamie Ellis, and we sat down to find out exactly where the problem is with the honeybees and what is leading to the colony collapse. And out of the top 10 reasons of colony collapse, insecticides were number 6. What I found out interesting, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, is the genetics of the bees. You know, I work cattle. I'm a large animal veterinarian, and I know if you don't change the genetics with your bulls and your herd, it gets diluted, your gene pool. But we haven't been able to import honeybees into this country, which I find just kind of baffling, to get the new genetics because of the threat of germs and bacteria. What are your thoughts about the best way to move forward to where we can ease restrictions in your experience? I'd like to hear from each of you on that. Go ahead, Doc.
The restrictions, you know, is obviously a bigger issue maybe with respect to regulation and the legal side of it. But I did want to comment on this genetics point because I think it's critically important.
Absolutely.
We have an individual working on honeybee genetics at Purdue. His focus has been the varroa mite, which, as you know, is probably the single most important parasite that's affecting colony collapse disorder. What he's identified is bees that have a grooming behavior where they basically kill the mites on other bees. He's looked at the genetics of this, he's identified the genes that are responsible for it, and he's breeding better bees in this country, and it's doubled the survival rate in the hives they've tested in Indiana. So the point is, you can put sophisticated biology to work on something like this issue, create a better bee, and that may then also provide evidence that we need to be looking at bringing bees in from other countries that give us maybe broader genes to work with respect to accomplishing it in this way.
I agree. Mr. Wilkins?
Thank you. So, although I don't grow cucurbit crops myself, I have many neighbors and colleagues in my state that do farm cucurbit type crops, a class of crops that are very dependent upon pollinators. So we as farmers, we understand this issue probably more better than anybody else. But you know, the banning of particular types of classes of chemistries, crop protected materials, and as you just stated, you know, insecticides are the number six cause for colony collapse disorder. You know, that would be a knee-jerk reaction. There's best management practices that we all follow as far as the time of day that we apply these crop protectant materials. We know that we are dependent upon pollinators for successful harvests of different types of crops. So it's in our best interest to protect our pollinators, and that's what we do.
Dr. Carrington, you want to weigh in, or they already said what you need to?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. Research is going to help. And to the extent that everyone can contribute, add a little bit of native landscaping, provide a little more native habitat for bees.
Thank you. And I know you guys are very cognizant of this. The work you're doing on GMOs, you guys are the forefront of getting that word out. And we know that over 100 Nobel laureates are on our side. The science is on our side. We need your help getting the information of what a GMO is or isn't. Our goal up here is to get the USDA to have a marketing program on that. I want it as common as like Schoolhouse Rocks on how a bill becomes a law so that everybody is educated of the benefits of GMOs. And with that, we're going to go to our great member, Mr. Jimmy Panetta from the state of California.
Thank you. I haven't been introduced as great before, so thank you. I appreciate that. That's a first. I know, definitely. Thank you, Congressman Yoho. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time, your efforts. I know it takes a lot of preparation to come here, and so thank you very much, and I apologize for being late. I'm Jimmy Panetta. I represent the Central Coast of California. There you have a large agricultural industry, obviously, as all three of you, I'm sure, know, with the valleys that we have, the fertile valleys we have, in San Juan, Pajaro, and of course the Salinas Valley, otherwise known as the salad bowl of the world. We are fortunate enough to have our own ag research station service research station there in Salinas. And it focuses a lot on the specialty crops there. And I've talked to many of the growers in that area, and they realize how lucky they are to have their own research station there that focuses on their crops. But also, being in Salinas Valley, we're in the shadow of Silicon Valley. And we are currently trying to develop those bridges when it comes to R&D and the advances in technology for agriculture. In fact, Forums sponsors this Ag Tech conference every year that just started. And I know they're working on mechanization, but I was just wondering if you're familiar with any sort of other efforts between Silicon Valley and the agricultural industry, in particular Salinas Valley, of course, that is going to further research, be it mechanization or be it in producing better, healthier, hardier crops, if you're familiar with anything like that. When it comes to Silicon Valley or in any other areas in the nation where, tech areas and their work with ag companies.
As a native California, I'll be first.
Please.
From Los Angeles area, but love your part of the state.
Thank you.
This is very much on the radar of Silicon Valley. It's particularly on the radar of the investment community centered in Silicon Valley. All of the major venture firms and private capital firms that you would know are looking at ag tech. And they're looking at it for the simple reason it's the great challenge to solve through technology. So where we're seeing and where we cross paths frequently are with the investment community, looking to fund startups, looking to put investments in companies that are developing technologies to lower meat consumption, for example. Artificial meat based on plants. They're looking at companies in the precision ag space, like we've talked about. They're looking at companies that get us to a point where natural resources are far less of a constraint in agriculture. They're also very much, and this has been a bit of a shift compared to the early days of ag tech, they're looking at things that have a much more direct impact on the consumer. A lot of the early ag tech very much benefited the farm and the farmers, and possibly in the grand scheme of things, this didn't help public perception, but I think Silicon Valley is very aware of this and are looking to put investments in technology related to ag that interfaces directly with the consumer.
I wish we had more time to talk about it because I think this is one of the most exciting and dynamic areas in agriculture today. We are, and Purdue's put a major investment in this space. We're able to measure things about growing plants in ways we've never been able to do that before, created incredible sets of data. And that's what so many of the tech companies are able to work with us on, manipulating, using that data in a predictive way to better manage a crop. Our Indiana farmers have made a major investment in that area. We're partnering with IBM, Verizon, HP Enterprises. I mean, these companies are bringing what they know about managing big data and the analytic tools into helping us do a better job of running farms. And it's a pretty exciting space.
Great. I just have a few seconds left, and I was fortunate enough to go to UC Davis, graduate from UC Davis, one of the land-grant schools, and glad to say that for the first time they've made the tournament as well. Although they drew Kansas, they probably can't compete with Kansas on the basketball court. I'm sure they can compete with them when it comes to agricultural research. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
And anybody who yields back 7 seconds is a great member of this subcommittee. Mr. Panetta, I wish you luck, and I remind you that one year I picked Arizona to win the bracket, and they lost in the first round to Santa Clara. So it could happen today. You just never know. I'd like to recognize our colleague from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of you being here today and sharing your expertise. I tell you what exciting stats go from 30 bushel 90, 80 years ago to now 175, and some places near 200. That's incredible. There's no farmer more efficient than the American farmer. And I think, not necessarily in this purview of this particular subcommittee, but it's a reminder how hard we got to work on trade policy out of the Agriculture Committee, because we can produce, but we got to make sure the demand's there, and the American farmer can do that. I wanted to ask a little bit about AFRI, and appreciate some of the comments that mentioned earlier that we need to invest more there. My understanding is that AFRI grant, to be approved under NIFA, it must clear a lot of different processes, a lot of layers of approval there. Approval from the leadership of the relevant NIFA Institute, the NIFA senior executives, the NIFA Policy Office, then the Office of the Chief Scientist. Are there too many layers in this for approval? Can we do better there? And how does this compare to other federal agencies when it comes to research? Thank you. And I just open it up to any of the three that would care to answer.
There are a lot of layers. Honestly, before preparing for this, I didn't realize how many layers there actually were. Now, my brief comment would be if they're simply checkoff layers, that's one thing. If they're layers of impediment, that would be a different problem. If they are stifling innovation and the most creative science, that would be a problem. I actually don't know if that's the case. I'll make one broader comment because you're touching on organization of NIFA and the competitive grants program within the context of the broader agency. And I think there's a lot of room, a lot of study, and some very interesting proposals that have been made to consider restructuring how research broadly within USDA is structured and managed. Can we elevate competitive research and scientific research in the agency and appropriately structure the management such that it's more efficient? There is tighter link between the secretary and research, and I think there are some very interesting proposals to do that. I would be in strong support of that, and the best model, in my opinion, for looking at this would be NIH.
You know, I worry that, certainly I think that there's the need for levels of review in order to advance a potential project for funding is in part due to the competitiveness. There's only so much dollars appropriated. One of my worries is that whether it's a graduate student, whether it's an untenured research professor, that because that it's only about a 25% success rate of getting funding for an innovative idea, that they lose their creativeness, that they lose their desire to innovate and think about new ways to solve challenges. So therein lies another reason why National CFAR is constantly asking for us to fully appropriate the AFRI funding at the amount that's authorized.
I can't compare NIFA to other agencies on this, but clearly anything we can do to make processes more streamlined, I think, is important, and to lower the barriers for folks to apply. I know NIFA has made investments in trying to upgrade some of their information technology simply to make that better, but down the road, it'd certainly be an area to continue to focus on.
One brief question, I'll focus a little more towards Mr. Carrington. The Farm Bill currently requires grants to be matched by non-land grant institutions. It's often waived. You're a proponent for removing that out of the next bill. Could you expound on that? Thank you.
Well, I think through appropriations, there's agreement with the notion since it is being waived. So I would question or suggest that if it's being waived against what's in the authorizing language, why put it in? I think it's a discriminatory element in the authorizing language that I struggle to find a purpose for. It puts organizations like us and private universities and non-land grant universities at a competitive disadvantage. It also creates a problem with faculty and scientists even applying if their organizations are saying, well, you got to raise a dollar-for-dollar match, it impedes and inhibits the creative applications that come from a broad, diverse range of institutions.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back my minus 20 seconds there to you, Chairman.
Yeah, you would have been a great member if you wouldn't have gone over time. Now, Don, great new member from Nebraska, thank you for your comments. I'd like to recognize our colleague from Delaware, Ms. Blunt Rochester, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel. Excuse me for being late, have 3 hearings at the same time, but I was really wanted to get here so that I could recognize a Delaware farmer. I'm from the state of Delaware, and we are very proud of our farming industry. We also have 2 land-grant institutions, and so it's really important, the focus on research. And I just wanted to ask a question of Mr. Wilkins. We know everyone is aware of the significance of research in agriculture as a field, but can you talk about specifically the impact that research has had on you in terms of supporting and expanding actual operations?
Thank you. So, as a young farmer just starting out in the 1970s, I relied very much upon the cooperative extension system, the land grant universities, as a disinterested third party. So that when a salesman, a manufacturer of farm inputs was giving me data to support the reason why I should use their product, I could look to the public research system for whether they had actually tested, tried, and proven whether that was an input that I should employ in my operation. Even today, I rely very strongly upon my county extension agent for advice. The industry has evolved and changed. We are much larger farming operations than we were 30 or 40 years ago. And we do a lot of our own on-farm practical studies and research. But most of the time, we reach out to our extension agents to involve them so that we can actually aid and assist in the public research field with our own practical on-farm studies. Some of the things that more recently, evolutions, the studies to determine the optimum rates of input nutrients to apply to my crops. And not just the optimum rates, but the timing of those rates. So we've employed a lot more irrigation on our farm. That's removing that as a barrier to reaching economic yield capacity. And then, so that way enables us to be able to determine what's the proper stage that the crop, how much nutrients does the crop need at each stage of growth. And then we can deploy those nutrients through the irrigation water. And then we proof that using tissue analysis. Now, I would not have known about all of these tools and analytical things that were available to me had it not been for the research that had been done at public land grants.
Great, thank you. And I'm not sure if Mr. Lawson was going to ask this question, but you started to mention Lunch and Learn series.
Go ahead.
Great. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Lunch and Learn series and some specifics on that as well?
I'd be happy to, yes. So for a number of years, National CFAR has sponsored these Lunch and Learn series here, and we appreciate very much the House Committee on Agriculture making their facilities available to us for that. As you know all so well, the youth and spirit that works here on the Hill, and their desire to absorb as much knowledge as they possibly can. These Lunch and Learn series that we conduct are an opportunity for us to bring researchers, scientists, experts, the vestibles of wealth of knowledge and information into these chambers, and to be able to share that information about what we're doing in the field of agricultural and food research to your legislative correspondents, legislative assistants, and many times members of Congress themselves attend.
Great, thank you. I yield back the balance of 40 seconds.
A great member from Delaware yields back 39 seconds. So No, thank you. The great part about being in the chair is I get to stay here the whole time, and now you get to answer my questions. And it's great to have you here. Look, I think today's hearing is another example of where we can find bipartisanship here in Washington that many in this country don't think exists, but it does exist right here on this committee, and especially within this subcommittee. The questions that have been asked have been about the subject at hand, and that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about the successes of our last Farm Bill, which I believe that, everybody around this horseshoe and that serves in this committee can find something in that bill that is working extremely well. And I'd like to remind everyone here that the Congressional Budget Office estimated that taxpayers would have only saved $23 billion in mandatory spending with the passage of that bill. And in reality, in 3 years, the CBO now says we've saved $104 billion in taxpayer dollars. So when we change words on pieces of paper here in Washington, D.C., it actually has an impact on taxpayers in this country. And what what we've heard from each of you and from my fellow colleagues is a back and forth on how we make those words on pieces of paper better within the research community. So thank you all for being here today to do that. And now, Dr. Carrington, since we asked you to be here, I would want to make sure that I start with you. I'm very impressed by your facility. I meant that in my introduction of you earlier today. I saw some of the cutting edge research that has been done there. I know my colleague, Mr. Dunn, asked a similar question about framing the importance of ag research. I'm glad, I think it was you, Dr. Carrington, forgive me if I was wrong, brought up the discrepancies and lack of parity between ag research and public investment in ag research versus public investment in other research priorities of this Congress. I would like to see more invested in NIH too, don't get me wrong, but they've had steep increases. I'd like to see more invested in energy research, but they've had steep increases. Whereas where we've seen ag research remain somewhat steady, in some cases go down. You mentioned some of the, an example of cutting edge research with the papaya, I believe, to Mr. Dunn's question. Are there any other examples that you would like this committee to understand that have come through the Danforth Center? And then I would open it up to the other two witnesses too, to talk about any cutting edge research that you're a part of.
Sure, I'll keep it on the RNA silencing, gene silencing theme, and just keep giving you more examples that should relate to consumers. Consumers should care about these. If you compare about, if you care about your diet and the types of oils and lipids you're eating, you care about having a high oleic acid diet. Gene silencing turns out to be a terrific way to rebalance in certain crops the levels of good oils versus bad oils. And through research in this area, we learned that nature already figured out how to do that. And breeding stocks in soybeans, for example, use this gene silencing mechanism, and we now have improved crops with a better oil profile. I'll give you one other example, and this one is a global example. If you care about our friends overseas, in particular those individuals in less developed countries, gene silencing is being used in research at our institution with partners in East Africa to address a problem affecting 30 to 50 million smallholder farmers that depend on cassava as a staple crop. Cassava is highly susceptible to viruses, however, and it's the biggest threat to food security for people in Tanzania, in Uganda, and Kenya. No, it's not in our immediate backyard, but I'll make the case that if we can use research that we're doing here to improve food security around the world, we're doing something that's going to have direct benefits to the United States and United States citizens.
And just one quick follow-up before I go to the other two witnesses. What percentage of ideas do you think, because of a lack of funding, end up on the cutting room floor?
The majority of ideas do not make it to funding. I'll give you just a few stats. You've got the funding rates, AFRI, depending on the stats, it's somewhere between 10 and 20% get funded, applications get funded. NSF, it's 23%, NIH, 17 to 18%. But if you look at the success rate at a funding agency like NSF, and I assume it's comparable through AFRI and other competitive grants programs, at NSF, the success rate for an individual investigator applying for grants over a 3-year period, that is, applying for grants every year, is only 35%. What that's saying is the majority of investigators who have, most of them have pretty good ideas, some have great ideas, but 2/3 of these scientists are not being funded when their ideas are pitched to the competitive grants programs. And I can tell you, having served on panels, having served as president of a research institution where I sign off on every proposal that gets submitted, there's a heck of a lot of great ideas that are never funded. And it's very unfortunate. It's a reflection of capacity that we have in this country that is, I'll say it, largely untapped because the resources aren't available to fund most of those ideas.
Thank you. Mr. Akridge.
Yeah, just a couple of quick examples. I mentioned this whole issue of what we can measure now and use in management decisions. We've got some researchers working on using cameras of a very particular type that can detect insect damage maybe a week or 10 days before the human eye can ever see it. And now we start to, determine or identify problems before we would ever normally catch them in the field, which gives us a chance to pursue solutions, maybe with, different forms of pesticides or lower levels, or maybe even avoiding pesticides because of the fact we can, again, detect this damage early. So that would be one example. Another one, international example, and you'll appreciate this. We have a corn breeder working on orange corn, very, very bright orange corn, and
Illini orange corn?
It would definitely be something an Illini would appreciate. And what's going on there is they've, through sophisticated biology, elevated the vitamin A content in that corn. That is a major issue in developing countries. Low vitamin A leads to blindness in children, and this particular corn then can be served. It's biofortified. It's another important area of research. Again, help us address child blindness in the developing world because of, again, some work done here.
Child blindness with orange corn.
You bet.
Very interesting. Mr. Wilkins, did you have anything you wanted to add to this particular question too?
Yes, although, as I said, I'm not a researcher, but through my capacity with American Soybean Association and National CFAR, I've met great researchers. And I think one of the shameful things that has occurred in our society the last few years has been the inability to commercialize innovative ideas because of the cost to bring a new, whether it's a GMO or something that's from gene silencing and gene editing to the marketplace.
What is the single most cost prohibitive element of the research process in moving that product to market that you would like to see us address?
Time. The amount of time that it takes for the innovation to make it through the regulatory process. That ultimately is what is causing the most amount of expense.
Is it too many agencies have their fingers on the research to have to sign off on, or is it just the overall compliance and regulatory environment that is in place already?
I think there's several factors. One of those is the desire at the government agencies to be sure that when they're sued by another NGO, that what they've done, the work that they've done, every I has been dotted, every T has been crossed, and they don't have to be embarrassed by something that they may have forgotten. We need some protections on the science and technology that will allow good regulators, good government officials to have some safeguards that that they're going to be able to do their job and not be weighed down by insignificant review processes of their decisions.
And so you have a review process, and you brought up legal challenges and legal issues.
Yes.
So,
there's
tort issues, or is this more of an issue with NGOs or certain organizations having problems with industry-based research partnerships?
Once we can get past this point of time in our society of not trusting science and technology in food. Everybody wants the latest, greatest science technology in their smartphone, the latest technology in their pharmaceutical, but they're apprehensive when we try to use science and technology in food production. It's been proven that omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids leads to greater heart health. So these are solutions to human health conditions that we can provide through healthier oils, healthier vegetable oils. But that innovation is sitting on a shelf because the marketability of that idea would have to, the potential return on the investment has been determined to be less than what it will cost to go through the process to be able to commercialize it. The citrus greening. There are solutions to citrus greening using biotechnology, but because citrus fruit is something that's directly consumed by humans, there's a fear that the millions of dollars spent trying to bring this to market will be wasted because of lack of public acceptance of the technology.
Well, thank you. And I would remind the witnesses, I think what you, and everybody in the room, what you're saying too is even with public investment in research, you have to have an ROI. All right, thank you. I know I took a lot of time, but that's the chairman's prerogative. I will now turn it over for a second round of questions to my colleague from Florida, Mr. Lawson, for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this deal with the STEM connection. And you know that the model has been changing for the universities over, I guess, the last past century. Curriculum offering have grown more diverse to reflect a very different society than it was in the 1800s. Is agriculture becoming lost in the mix? What role do you see the college and agriculture in STEM education? Reaching non-traditional agriculture students, especially minority men, are advancing opportunities for women as an example. And anyone who care to comment on it, because it's a very, in my opinion, a very important issue in this century.
Yeah, and I can't agree more that it's a critical issue in this century because everything we've talked about to this point depends on human talent and having the people in place to do the research that we need to address the challenge. I think, and we've been working hard as APLU and as local institutions to help position ag as front and center science, technology, engineering, and math. Our president will talk about STEAM periodically. He puts an A in the middle of that and for agriculture. And that's happening with respect to the curriculum. It's very science-focused in general now in terms of preparation. I think you put your finger on the challenge, though, is how do you help young men and women see their passion for science addressing food and agricultural issues? 4-H is one way that that's playing out across the country. So 6 million youth, they've taken on STEM and STEM projects as an important part of their overall curriculum. And that's taking us, and just give you an Indiana examples, it's taking us into downtown Indy, into Gary, Indiana, where maybe traditional 4-H kinds of things just didn't fit. But when you start talking about fluid power, biotechnology, or renewable energy, young men and women get really excited about the science happening there, and the 4-H volunteer model with the science underneath it has been working very effectively. So we got a lot of work to do there, but I would say nationally it's a priority for us to help young men and women find their passion for science in agriculture, and vehicles like 4-H can help us do that.
Yeah, 2 quick points. First of all, we see a big issue attracting people into agriculture and agriculture-related scientific fields. So we have taken on Even though we're not a university, we're not a degree-granting institution, we've taken on our part of that challenge and asked, what can we do to motivate and stimulate young minds to consider plant science and agriculture as a career? And I think we believe, as do many others, that probably one of the most important things to do is to get people experiencing what plant science and agriculture is. Bring them to the center, get their hands dirty, and very importantly, get materials, talent, STEM compatible educational supplements into the schools. We have wonderful schools in St. Louis. We also have some schools that for historical reasons have been underserved, and we've identified those as big opportunities. We, for example, have outreach and education programs in schools in 16 in the city of St. Louis, 16 schools. These are programs that in some cases are very simple, in other cases are a little more sophisticated. We have a program called Green Means Grow, and it provides students with the experience of planting a seed, watching it grow, and learning where their food comes from. This is not an inner city problem. It's not a problem unique to anywhere. It's a problem that Americans have because so few of us grew up on a farm. We don't know where our food came from in most cases, and it's a huge problem. It affects the problem Mr. Wilkins referred to as well. So this is a big issue, getting people experiencing STEM education, agriculture through STEM experiences is a very important part of the solution.
I would love to, yes. So STEM education, it's very dear to me, to my heart, that as a layman scientist myself, that decided to be a producer rather than going into scientific research. We work, my colleagues and I, we work very closely with our high school, our public school systems, to try to provide opportunities for students to be able to visit our farms, to be able to be initiated to what it means to produce food. Many times we support in our rural areas both financially and through advocacy for small school farms or small school gardens to be able to assist the educators there in introducing our future consumers to the way that modern food production is done. I do stress modern food production. I think oftentimes what happens in many of these situations is someone with another agenda tries to impress that upon these impressionable minds at an early stage. I think that we as administrators of social programs need to be cognizant that we need to hit that off and not allow that to happen. Because science, technology, engineering, and math, we are deficient in that field here as a nation, and we need to develop that in order for us to continue to be an economic superpower in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson, and thank you again to our panel. I've just got a couple more questions if you three could bear with me. Dr. Akridge, some of our biggest competitors in the global commodity markets are the same countries that are investing billions in their domestic agricultural research, to say nothing of the billions in trade-distorting subsidies to their growers. This includes, as you mentioned, and others, countries like China, India, and Brazil. What are the short-term and long-term implications of their growing investment compared to our U.S. investment in ag research?
I think it comes back to many of the points that we've been making, I think, to this point in the hearing. Ultimately, research drives productivity. It drives competitiveness. There are always lags in research from the time that dollar is spent until we ultimately see it, on Mr. Wilkins' farm or benefiting the consumer in some way. Sometimes we don't see those things in the short run because we're living on investments that we've seen in the past. But the kind of investments that China, India, and Brazil are making right now are definitely going to pay off long-term for their sectors, making them more competitive, again, helping feed a growing world. And I think the question for us then becomes, will we make the commitment today, obviously, to benefit the future as we think about the lags that these research investments are going to make? I think additionally, you know, as we think about research, it's also about human talent. And the dollars we invest, again, today are helping train the next generation of scientists that ultimately find their way into the companies that are going to do much of that work. So again, if we don't have that talent coming into the pipeline today because they don't see a future, these frustrations for funding rates, et cetera, drive them into other places, we undermine the human talent, the human capital that's in this industry. And again, I think that has really important long-term impacts.
Dr. Carrington?
One quick comment on this. I think everyone appreciates what China in particular is doing to build its scientific infrastructure and its scientific talent base. They're putting huge investments in. Two effects that are acute right now. Number one, it's increasing the competition globally for talent. This cannot be overstated. Second thing it's doing, even closer to home, I know that the dean, no doubt, deals with this issue. Because funds are being invested in China, talent is being drawn away part-time from the United States. And it's being done in a couple of ways. Here's a common way. You're a talented professor at Purdue University or Washington University. Perhaps you are of Chinese origin, perhaps not. You are being hired on a part-time basis, perhaps for 2 months out of the year, to work at a Chinese university. Now, if you think about the implications of that, on the surface, what's the problem? We are a sharing, we are a global, we are an international scientific community, but the reality is that we're also losing time, we're losing intellectual capacity. There are teams that are being built around these individuals who are getting these part-time appointments, and those are teams that are being built in China, not in the United States. I want to make sure that my comments are not misconstrued as objective or objectionable to investments that the Chinese are making. My hat's off to them. But there are impacts on our institutions, our scientists, and our scientific capacity here in the United States.
And would you agree that there are going to be impacts on our producers, impacts on their ability to sell in the global marketplace too, if products are available that are cutting edge, that are developed in other countries that give them a competitive advantage over our producers?
That's exactly right. And whether or not we see that this year, next year, or the following year versus 5, 10 years out, I can't give you a time frame, but the dean is I believe, quite accurate in his assessment on the long-term impact.
So, Mr. Wilkins, since you're part of what I call one of my special crops, soybeans in Illinois, rather than specialty crops, I mean, are you concerned is in your capacity with the Soybean Association as a leader of producers, are you concerned that America's economic edge that we talked about, I know I talked about in my opening statements, when it comes to ag and the ag sector, that we're going to be losing that competitively in the global marketplace because other countries are investing more public dollars into their own research?
Well, I would argue that you know, we've just recently celebrated over 100 years of our cooperative extension system. As I've participated in international trade missions and helped host trade teams from other countries that have come to the United States, they often look at our model of how we conducted agricultural research, food research, and how we disseminate that information to producers. You know, that 100-year model that has been part of what has led to the success of our agricultural industry in this nation. So I think that behooves us to recognize that that we have been falling short in maintaining that strength within our agricultural sector. Am I worried about losing market potential? You know, I think that the statisticians tell us that the global population is growing. And we in this country alone are not going to be able to fulfill that growing need for not just calories, but proper and good nutrition. You know, it may be a double-edged sword. If other nations are investing dollars in public research, and if a component of that research is modern biotechnology and other production-enhancing tools, and if that leads to greater consumer acceptance, then in the long run, that may help us to be able to bring our creative innovation ideas to the marketplace even more quickly and with less economic expense. You know, we are a great nation, United States. We are very good at innovation. There's a reason why other countries try to steal our intellectual property, because we have such great ideas. In order to solve some of these problems of global needs for food and nutrition, I think that there's opportunities for us to cooperate, but at the same time making sure that you know, trade is very near and dear to me, but we need to make sure that when we are involved in international trade, that it's not only free and open access, but that it is fair for all of us.
Well, thank you. One last question for those of you who have participated in the AFRI application process. You know, look, this subcommittee is, I believe, part of our congressional organization charts that has to get into the weeds on certain issues that really impact the ability of public dollars to be able to go further. And in this case, go further with research. I'm concerned that there might be some processes in place with our public research dollars and the institutions that govern them that slow down your ability to actually get new ideas into the testing stage and out into the marketplace. Is there any suggestion, Dr. Akridge or Dr. Carrington, any suggestion you would give us as policymakers as we move into this next farm bill to make the process go more smoothly? Because I heard earlier that time was the biggest hindrance to getting products through the research process. How do we make your time better spent? And how do we do that with something as simple as the application process and the grant administration process? Whoever wants to start.
Maybe just two suggestions and thoughts. One, pre-proposals can be a way to short-circuit this process and help screen ideas, where the process is, you know, let's get the essence of the idea in front of somebody, let's get a quick read whether or not it's useful or not, and then we let that person elevate and put more effort in it if it's got, you know, a merit, as opposed to spending tons and tons of time writing full proposals that in the end the success rate's really low. The second one, and we've seen this some in Europe, where the response by the government to industry investments in ag-research is very quick. So if industry is willing to put some money on the table, the federal government in those cases will match that money very quickly. There's not an elaborate process, and it allows you to move at the speed of industry in some cases where, again, our normal processes wouldn't do that. So more effective ways of thinking, or more creative ways, excuse me, of thinking about how we handle, excuse me, industry match might be another possibility.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Akridge. Dr. Carrington?
Yeah, I would echo those comments. I don't know if you've actually held in your hand an AFRI application before.
Is it like the tax code?
It's in some ways worse than the tax code. It takes an average investigator putting together a $500,000 proposal. It takes them it takes roughly a month of their time working seriously on it. It takes institutions time. It's a pretty onerous process. So the pre-proposal notion is a very good one, and it's used very effectively in many different agencies, including some within NIFA. How we handle budgets at the pre-proposal stage, it used to be that all grants to all agencies had full vetting of the budgets internally and had to be developed at the proposal stage. NIH had the great idea to just do budgets modularly, just give us a guess on how much it will cost, and if the proposal is meritorious and recommended for funding, then we'll figure out the budget pieces. But we only devote the time to figuring out a budget after the fact.
Have you seen that reduce, that compliance time and the
It
length
lowers,
that it takes?
for agencies and programs that have a low budget preparation requirement at the submission stage, let's put it this way, it's a big morale boost in the finance department.
Well, I'm not here to look for morale boosters in the finance departments at the institutions.
Well,
What I want to know, though, Dr. Carrington, what would you estimate the time savings is? And is there an increase in the amount of time once that so-called, maybe I'll call it a pre-application is put in? Because I've known some other government agencies that will have a simplified introductory process, but then the second tier process doubles what the previous process would have taken if you would have provided more specifics on the front end. How do we make that better on all ends?
Yeah, doubling the work by saving work up front and doubling it at the end, that doesn't sound very good either.
No.
The reality is that when these proposals are put together, it takes a large institutional investment, all the way from certifications to budgets to just making commitments, and the biggest investment on the part of the investigator who's pitching the idea. A standard 15-page proposal or a 10-page proposal isn't really a 10 or 15-page proposal. That's just the research plan part. Typical proposal is 60, 70, 80, 100 pages with other stuff in it. It is a big burden, so we could really get in the weeds, serious weeds, if we wanted to here. I don't think you really want to, but I will offer to provide suggestions at a future time if you do reconsider this.
Well, I would like to get into the weeds, but I don't think anybody else in the room would. So we will take your suggestions to make the processes better. Please feel free to submit those. We would love to work with you on those. I know I said that was my last question, but I thought of another one, Mr. Wilkins. Obviously, our subcommittee has jurisdiction over NAS. We've had NAS administrators in our oversight responsibilities, talking about some of the surveys, the census documents that they require our producers to fill out. You're a producer too, right?
Yes, sir.
Give me an estimate. How many hours a year do you spend filling out NAS documents? And besides the one census survey, how many would you guess that you would fill out a year on average?
Chairman Davis, I must confess that the amount of time that I spend on filling out the reporting and documents that I know are required of me and that are going to keep me in compliance with programs including crop insurance. And what I'm referring to is Risk Management Administration production reports.
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot more time on those documents because I know that they are subject to an audit and review, and I want to make sure that the information that I provide on those reports is accurate to the tenth of a bushel. I confess that when NAS reaches out to me with a survey, because of the number of irons that I have in my fire and the amount of time that I must commit to my business and my family, I do not, maybe not always giving the specific and most accurate information that I can. Oftentimes, I may not have the time to do the written report, so then NAS follows that up with a telephone call. And if I'm in the pickup truck on my way to a field or on my way to a cow that's giving birth, I'm going to try to make that call as short as possible. So I'm not always referring back to my records and relaying completely accurate information. That being said, I am grateful for the number of producers in our country that do take the time or do have the time to be able to provide accurate information to NASS. Because when I look at NASS data in its aggregate for the country as a whole, it usually is spot on. It's usually pretty accurate at predicting what planted acres may be, predicting what production may be, or proofing what production actually is. However, when you drill down to the individual survey area, whether that be a state or a county, it's oftentimes simply it's dependent upon the accuracy and the number of respondents to that survey that they get the information from.
Well, thank you. Obviously, as we move forward, we want to make NASS more accountable and get the data that is going to allow better ag research possibilities in the future, too. Thank you for answering that question that I probably bet you never thought you'd get here today. But I appreciate your honesty. I truly do, Mr. Wilkins, in responding to that, because that does make a difference for policymakers like us to talk to the agencies in charge to make those surveys more friendly and drill down on what is important. In our oversight hearing, the first question I asked the representative from NASS was, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you consider yourself a risk taker? The gentleman responded, he thought he was, I think, a 5, but his wife would say more closer to a 10. He couldn't answer the question. It was question 17 on their ag census. At what point does the psychological condition of the producer at that point in time matter to the overall data set? To me, it doesn't. And if we can work together to reduce to reduce those issues, then you're going to be able to better provide more accurate information to NASS, and then the researchers can use that information in a much more consistent and better way. So as we move forward, we may ask for your assistance. I see we have no more members ready to ask questions. My closing remarks are thank you to each and every one of you. This is truly essential information that we are going to be able to take back to our colleagues and also the folks that work in our ag committee to write a better farm bill. If there's anything that we have not asked you that you would like to provide to us, please feel free to follow up with us. I do want to remind members that under the rules of the committee, but actually I forgot something. I noticed some of my colleagues today wanted to mention the president's budget. While we haven't seen a lot of specifics on the president's budget and how it's going to impact ag overall, one specific line that has been put forth is the research title. And it looks to me, luckily, like the research title is going to remain stable. That's good news for what we're discussing here today, and I'm just as interested as the rest of my colleagues to find out what the funding levels are for the rest of the ag titles. So with that, I want to say thank you again to our witnesses. Mr. Lawson, thanks for sticking around with me and sticking it out today. And under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member or any other information you'd like to offer us. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research is adjourned.